All right, everyone. How are you? You good? You great? Man, I know you can do it. Whatever you're doing today, I got your back. Welcome to this week's episode of our podcast. It's called Is Breakfast Included? Let's get right into it. This week, Lisa and I sat down with Kevin Martin, lead singer of the band Candlebox. You know Candlebox. Man, all those great songs, that great voice. Kevin was gracious enough with his time. He talked to us, told us a little bit about the band's history. He humored my fanboy. I am a big fan of Candlebox. I've always been a fan of Candlebox. He answered all my questions. We got into some stories. He told us the history of the band, what he's doing now. They just released an album called The Long Goodbye and a tour with Three Doors Down. The Long Goodbye means they're going away. That's it. Candlebox is no longer. He told us his decision on that. We talked about the new album, the tour, the upcoming documentary. Man, it was a lot of fun, and it was an honor for me to do this. So without further ado, let's check it out. Well, tell everyone who you are.
My name is Kevin Martin. I'm the lead singer of the band Candlebox.
Candlebox. Dude, first of all, before we get into this, I'm a big fan. Like, you don't remember meeting me. We met years ago, and I booked one of your shows in Dallas when I lived there, and you were with the High Watts. And
right on, man.
Yeah, at the time I had no self-awareness, and I was like, Kevin Martin. But since
That's
then,
awesome.
I've gotten a little more. But man, you were born you're from Illinois originally, correct?
Yes.
I noticed that you moved few times during crucial ages. One at 10, you moved to Texas, which is where I'm from. And then you moved to Seattle at 15. Like, those are like serious ages to move. You've made all your friends when you're 10, and from 10 to 15, and then your parents are like, hey, we got to move at 15 when you're going through all the changes, and you're like, oh, fuck. How was that, man?
I was pissed, but I mean, it's life. My dad was a sales manager, and that's kind of what happened. Listen, all of that, of course, as a young kid, it makes no sense to you. But as an adult, you start to understand, all of that is what has made me the man that I am. So all of that experiences and all of the friends that I've had to make, moving into a new town at the age of 6 or 7 or 10 or whatever, having to immediately kind of make yourself available to people so that you have some sort of life outside of being a loner. And all of that stuff kind of taught me to be a better person and a listener and a conversationalist. And so I'm not really uncomfortable in any situations anymore. Like, if I, round a Bill Clinton or whatever, I can have a conversation with him. So, I mean, it's really just about, what I was able to do as a young man and carry on to the life I lead now.
Right on. Have you ever been around Bill Clinton?
I have. I met him back in 2006, 2005.
Yeah. I met him on his first campaign. I was young, but he did that little small town thing when he was running for president. Yeah. And my parents owned a Mexican restaurant, and they catered for him and his entourage. Cool. And so I met him. I didn't know he was going to be the president at the time. I wasn't interested in politics, but he was a really nice guy. He was really nice to my parents and so forth. But
he's a good dude.
Yeah. Man, are there any musicians in your family, or is this just something? Are you the black sheep that decided to take this road?
No, my father was a jazz musician. He played all the woodwind and all the brass. My mother was a singer. She sang the standards. My brother Dennis played drums. My sister played flute. My brother Brian played saxophone, and I played all the above in the hopes that one of them would stick. And I started playing drums when I was 10. That was the real love of my life. And then I got stuck with being the lead singer of a rock and roll band, which is I'm the reluctant lead singer of Candlebox. So there you go.
Was that your first band, Candlebox?
As a singer, yeah. As a singer, it was my first band.
Yeah. And man, being in Seattle at 15, everybody knows the Seattle sound, as it progressed, Hendrix and Queensryche and Heart, to what it became, the grunge era. But you guys kind of were a little bit of all of that. Is that what your ideal was? I mean, you guys had songs, you had, when you
I think for us, Candlebox is an interesting story. none of us really knew one another. I knew Scott, the drummer, through just running around with people in Seattle, but I didn't know
Mhm.
Barty. I didn't know Pete, and vice versa, four ways. No one really knew one another. So you had all these influences that the four of us had grown up on that were so entirely different that it helped create the Candlebox sound. If you look at the history of Jerry and Lane from Alice in Chains, they were both in metal bands. It was kind of what they grew up on, and it was a no-brainer that when Jerry left Diamond Lie to join Alice in Chains, that it was going to be something amazing. Soundgarden, the same thing. Chris was really into the progressive rock, and so was Kim Thale, and Matt Cameron was playing with the band called Bam Bam. There was just so much kind of similar styles. But with Candlebox, we pulled from so many different things because our musical tastes were so different. I grew up on punk rock. That's all I listened to, punk rock and new wave. Barty was a huge Jaco Pastorius Beatles fan. Peter Klett, I don't think he'd ever listened to the Beatles. He loved Iron Maiden, Black Sabbath, Judas Priest. And Scott was big into like Steve Gadd and a lot of the jazz players. So we kind of threw all those things in a pot, and somehow we cooked this stew called Candlebox that worked. And I think that that's kind of why 30 years later we're still here,
Yeah.
because it's not it's not an acquired taste, or it's an acquired taste, but it's not a flavor for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, how long were you guys together before you got your record deal?
About 2 years.
2 years.
Yeah.
And that was, I remember when that album came out. It was during the big grunge thing, and a lot of people were like, well, Candlebox just got signed because they're from Seattle. But that album, man, were you guys expecting the reception that album got?
No, not at all. No, that was not something that we were remotely in tune with. I think that we had an idea that we had a song called Far Behind. It was going to be somewhat special, but if you'd asked me, that record was going to sell millions of copies, I would have said no. I am not a big fan of the first album. There are two songs on it that I really, really like, You and Arrow. But the rest of it's kind of like, these are okay songs. And, but it just goes to show you what the fuck I know. But yeah, I mean, and I think it had a lot to do with the fact that I just really didn't know the guys in the band. So when we made those songs, it just kind of seemed, this is working. We'll see what happens in the next album. And of course, Lucy was an entirely different departure for us as a band. But
Yeah.
I think that, yeah, ultimately it was just, somehow we were fortunate enough for an audience that wanted something different to come out of Seattle, and no, most people didn't even know we were from Seattle. So there weren't any magazines knocking down our doors to tell our story.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I do remember when that album came out, and it to hear you say that you're not a big fan of it. There was so many, but Arrow is one of my favorite tracks on the album, Arrow, and of course, Far Behind. That's just the album to me is full of barn burners, man.
Thank you.
And I saw you guys early on that tour. When the album was dropped, all the radio stations were doing these shows, and I saw you guys at the Basement in Dallas for $1.97 that the Eagle 97 put on. And I just remember hearing those songs live, and it was just, there was in my mind as a young kid, there was no way you were going to hit those notes live, and you just fucking made me look like an asshole.
I remember that show well. We played with the Nixons at that show,
The
and
Nixons, yeah, in July Alley, I believe, was the opening band. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, that's right. And it was, I mean, I had certainly heard of the Nixons because of a lot of my friends in Texas were talking about them. And, have you heard this band? They kind of sound like they're from Seattle. I remember this is a funny story. Zach was, kind of complaining that they had to open for Candlebox because I used to move the gear in with the crew guys because I liked to just kind of get a vibe for the club. And so they thought I was like a tech or something, and he was complaining about it. And I said, look, man, I kind of think it's interesting as well, being that you're from Texas. And I said, I'm the lead singer of Candlebox, and I'm sorry that you have to open for us, but I happen to actually like your music, and it's nice to meet you. And he was a little bit, very uncomfortable at that point. It was an awkward situation because he'd been complaining about us, and then he was actually complaining about it in front of the lead singer of the band. So it was a strange thing. But the funny thing is we're still friends to this day. And I see Zach every time I'm in Nashville, and he was actually going to help write some songs in this record because he's a major songwriter in Nashville now.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
he was scheduling wise, we couldn't work it out. But yeah, it's fond memories of Dallas, man. That was one of my favorite shows, and I do remember that it was $1.97
$1.97.
and I don't think it sold out, which is funny. So
I didn't want to mention that part, but I know there was a good amount of people there, and everybody there just had a great time, man. It was just such a good show, and the bill was killer. July Alley was a big band in Dallas. Of course, the Nixons, not being from Dallas, but calling Dallas their home, and then you guys, man, really came in and just made your statement. One thing about that show I remember, and I tell this story to anyone who'll listen. I always say, I saw Candlebox for $1.97. You were wearing this shirt. And Lisa can attest. I've told her this story, and maybe you remember. It said "Eat me," and then under it, it was like Mexican food, Chewy's shirt. And you mentioned something about it, and I've never been able to find that shirt. I've wanted that shirt for years, and you said something about it. And everyone I tell that I saw is like, Kevin Martin was wearing this shirt that said "Eat me," but it was "Eat Mexican food."
Yeah, Eat me, Zyken. Yeah, I love Chewy's. Is like back when when I was growing up, it was one of my favorite restaurants when I would go back to Texas to visit friends. I love that place. And I just thought that shirt was so funny. A little dog on the front of it. I think I'm wearing it actually in the Candlebox poster that Karen Blair took of us. But yeah, I mean, it's, that was one of my favorite shirts. I think I had that up until probably like 99. And then it just kind of went, disappeared with some of my old suitcases and whatnot. But yeah, that's one of my favorite shirts. I love that.
Yeah. So I wanted to say that. I want it on record now that everybody can hear that I love that shirt.
And I can attest that you were there.
You guys toured for, man, a couple of years on that first album, being not really knowing each other, playing those songs night after night. Tour. I mean, once you're on a bus, you can't help but get to know your bandmates, your crew. Did that show up on Lucy, on the next album?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, a lot of those idiosyncrasies that you deal with, human beings were interesting subjects, and I think the thing that was interesting about it was there's a level of commitment that you have a responsibility to as a band, and it was kind of lacking when we started to make the Lucy record. It was as though all the success had kind of gone to our heads, and we weren't really focused on making the next record. And that had a lot to do with what we had gone through for 21 months or 20 months. I can't remember exactly how long it was that we were on that first album, but touring with Metallica, touring with Rush, touring with the Flaming Lips into the latter part of 94. We kind of grew apart as a band, and it was difficult to make the Lucy record because I'm, incredibly organized person, and I schedule things, and I know what my responsibilities are. And that's not necessarily the case with Barty and Pete and Scott. Those guys had other plans, and I couldn't make their plans work with my plans. So it became a difficult record to make. And it's why I don't really like Lucy as an album, because of that kind of emotion that goes along with it. There's a lot of history there for me, and frustration with that record. And I thought it could have been better. I thought we could have focused more. And even our producer, Kelly, was distracted. So, sitting with Guy Oziri and Freddie Demand, the A&R guy and label president from Maverick, when the record was done, I said to them, I was like, you should not release this album. We should put this away and take some time off. It's not time for us. But they have budgets and schedules that they have to stick to, and unfortunately, our idea of not doing that was not on their schedule.
Yeah. So kind of the case of you have your whole life to write your first album and 6 months to write the second one.
Well, and I mean, it's really like when you get to know somebody over the course of 20 months, in a tube of toothpaste, basically driving down the road, there are things I'm sure that those guys couldn't stand me because my OCD and constantly put your shit away, put your shit away, put your shit away. That's my thing. But we really probably needed to take a nice long, like a year-long break before we ever got into making the Lucy record, just so that we
Yeah.
could, get our heads around what had happened to us over the course of 20 months.
Yeah. Was that maybe you being very OCD, very organized, very like I've got a schedule? Was the reception for Lucy, was that an eye opener for the rest of the band? Did they
Yeah.
come out and say like were their fingers pointed or
No,
it's
no, no, no. I mean, I think everybody accepted responsibility for
yeah.
what happened with Lucy. It took years to do that. That didn't happen at the time, of course, no, because there were drugs and alcohol involved in the middle of that. So nobody's going to really say, "Oh, I was fucked up," and that's why the record sounds like shit. That doesn't
Yeah.
happen until you get sober. But it was all of us. The reality of it is we should have said no as a band to our team and
Yeah.
said we need some time, but we didn't do that. When your advance is $750,000 for your second record, it's a huge chunk of change to look in the face and say I'm not going to take that right now.
Yeah.
Um, you fall into a trap sort of as a band, and we weren't smart enough, and we didn't have a good enough team around us to say, hey, you know what, let's just take a step back. You guys get used to yourselves again, get used to being home, enjoy the time alone for a bit, and then get back in the studio. We didn't have that.
I know. The follow-up to Lucy was Happy Pills, which to me was I mean, I loved Lucy. I thought it was a great album. And it's one of those things that a fan would say, like, man, there's some great songs on here. Why isn't this album, blowing up as much as the first album? But Happy Pills to me was really uh not a departure, but it was more like, hey, what are we doing? But it's still a great album to me, man.
Thank you. Well, Happy Pills has everything to do with the producer Ron Nevison. It was not that was not the person that we wanted to produce the album. It was
Uh-huh.
somebody that the label kind of pushed on us, and he came from that kind of pop world of working with the Damn Yankees, and his claim to fame is that he was the engineer on Physical Graffiti, but he doesn't tell you that he got fired because he put the tapes on a speaker and side two of Physical Graffiti got erased, so they had to re-record it. He doesn't tell you that, but he's a good producer. He had a great ear for pop sensibility and pop songs. The record for me is way too clean. Growing up on punk rock music, Lucy was the record that I loved the tone of it. I loved the rawness of it. Happy Pills is far too clean. I think there's a lot of kind of throwaway tracks on it. I think there's filler tracks on it that I don't. I would never have in a million years recorded, but sometimes when you get in, you as a democracy, as a band, three against one, and
Yeah.
that's kind of what happens when you make those records. And then that's in the same sense as me with, forcing, songs down Pete's throat, like Stone's Throw Away. And sometimes, that was Barty and Dave backing me up on those tracks. And with songs like Offerings and Belmore Place, that's Barty and Dave agreeing with Pete for songwriting. So, really it was a matter of how are we going to get the record done? And it almost didn't get made. Maverick, was in upheaval at that point. Freddie
Yeah.
was being bought out of the company. Um, there was an opportunity that we could have walked away from that record and never made it and taken a huge advance and been off the label. But for some reason, they decided to let us make that record, even though they weren't going to work it. They never decided to put anything behind it, and it kind of fell by the wayside. So we were damned if you do, damned if you don't with Happy Pills, I think.
Yeah. Who did you want to produce that album?
We had asked Jeff Lynne from ELO
Yeah.
to produce it, and he said yes. But the label felt like he was just too kind of old school for what they were trying to do, which is weird that they picked Ron Nevison. I couldn't get any more old school. I think maybe because of Ron's success with the Damn Yankees and stuff like that. But yeah, it was. We had asked Jeff Lynne. He said yes. We also asked Roger Waters from Pink Floyd, which was my number one choice, and he had agreed to do it as well. But
Yeah.
You know, we got stuck with Ron Nevison, and
Yeah.
like I said, he's a great producer. I can't stand the guy. I'll never make a record with him again, but he's a great producer.
Yeah. I can imagine what it would have sounded like with Jeff Lynne and his style of producing of
Oh my God, it
I
would have
just
been
want the guitar player in the room. I just want the
oh,
drummer in the room.
it would have
Everybody
been
else get the
amazing.
fuck out.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
can
and
imagine.
the stacks of vocals and everything that he would have done, and the amount of piano that's on Happy Pills. I mean, there would have been tons more of organ and
Yeah.
piano.
Yeah.
And I love that's why this new record has, I think what 4 or 5 songs is, basically the foundation of a piano foundation. So
Yeah. Hey, let's talk about that, man. The long goodbye. Dude, what a fucking way to go out. You know,
keep 35 minutes.
yeah, it's 35 minutes of in your fucking face, dude.
Yeah.
I'm sorry for cursing, but dude, right off after the first couple of listens, I don't know how you pronounce it, elegant or elegante.
Elegante. Well, I mean, it's Spanish, right? You're
Yeah,
Guerrera.
elegante. That chorus is made for an arena.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. We played that on this tour with Three Doors Down in arenas, and it sounded amazing.
yeah. So in listening to it, I kept starting that one over. It took me a while to get to the rest of the album because I was like, man, that's my kind of music right there. I love, the whole chanting thing. Like,
Yeah.
it's really good. But there's some other great tracks. What is the Ugly People? Were you mad
Ugly.
when
Yeah.
were you mad when you wrote that out that song?
Well, no, I mean, it's really, so the album, the reason it's called A Long Goodbye is it's basically the 30 years that I've been making music and the things
Yeah.
that I've seen, the creative nature that I've had, the music that I've experienced, the inspirations that I've had, the influences that have constantly kept me in this sense of sanity when it comes to music and the things that I love. So when it came time to do Ugly, it's really just about the world we live in right now, and the fact that there's this kind of we're desensitized by the cruelty of humanity, and the fact that we're okay with shows like the Kardashians or Naked and Afraid or Survivor or The Voice or America's Got Talent, with people saying what they want to say or like what these football players. I don't know if you read that statement that the guy who was I can't remember what team was a couple weeks ago where people just trolled him and called him every name in the book because he missed a catch and the team lost. And how we're so comfortable saying that kind of awful stuff to another human being behind a keyboard.
Yeah.
And that beautiful people do the same thing. Why are we so comfortable talking shit about anything? Why are we not more focused on trying to be uplifting and positive and change this world we're living in? I mean, I've got a 15-year-old son right now that, I'm trying to protect him from everything out there.
Yeah.
These are things that he can experience that I would never have dreamed of at the age of 15. I mean, talking to my parents about having a White Claw, I would never, ever have told my parents that I had a drink at a party. My son's okay with that. He's comfortable coming to me doing that. That scares the shit out of me. The same time, it makes me very happy that he's comfortable enough to have that conversation with me. But Jesus Christ, man, I can't imagine what these kids are experiencing that I see on a daily basis. The kind of shit talking that happens about Candlebox or Three Doors Down or any of the music that's going out there right now. It's
Yeah.
really, really an unfortunate situation. So I wasn't angry. I just find it odd that people feel comfortable doing that because that's where we live right now. Ugly people say ugly things. Pretty people do the same thing. This is just bullshit. It needs to
Yeah.
stop.
Yeah. We put one of these out every week, one of these episodes, and I'm the type of person that I always use this as a comparison. Every time Lisa does all the work, every time I put it
She doesn't say a damn thing though.
That's what I pay her to do, Kevin. That's what I pay her to do. She gets 100% or 50% of what I make, which is zero.
There you go.
But I tell her every week, like as soon as it goes live, I've got that Adam Sandler skit in my head. They're all going to laugh at you. They're all going to laugh at you. And then I get through that. And we've done, 134 episodes. We put one out a week and it still like freaks me out to do it. So yeah, but I heard Dave Chappelle say something about he doesn't listen to what people say on Twitter because Twitter's not real. And it just stuck with me. Like anybody can say anything behind a keyboard,
No, it's true. And, you look at, for example, Candlebox, out of 300 or 400 comments about something, you're going to recognize the one where somebody says, I don't know, this record sucks. You can, it's just as human beings, that's just kind of what hurts us, and the challenge is to allow yourself the freedom to understand that that's just somebody's opinion, and what you've created or what it is that you're doing, whether it's podcasts or making albums or art or whatever. You can't please all the people all the time, but you can certainly tell them to go fuck themselves.
Yeah, which is very very fulfilling when you can do that.
No, it's a terrible thing to say.
No, it's great. Hey man, so what I didn't realize is you wrote most of the early stuff. Like you were one of the main songwriters, but on The Long Goodbye, you actually started collaborating with people. What was that like, man, to kind of give up the reins a little bit?
Well, I've always been the lyricist and I've always been the melody writer. When it came to writing the songs, it would be like Pete and I sitting down or Barty and I sitting down and writing these things out, figuring out chord progressions or, turnarounds and stuff like that. I've never considered myself to be, a singer songwriter. I can write songs by myself, but I choose to kind of collaborate with other artists when it comes time to writing songs. When it came to the lyrics of this record, I wanted to say things differently than I had said them before. And I am a creature of habit when it comes to what I talk about. And so I'm not veering too far away from what it is that people understand about me politically or emotionally or romantically or whatever. But I wanted to make sure that I said it differently on this album than I had ever said it before. And I knew that I had to do that with outside influence and outside writers. So the producer, Don, put together a great team of young, talented writers in Nashville for me to work with. And I was so blown away with how I could give them just the cliff note of what I was talking about, and they would just run with it. Like the line in Elegante where it says, lustful heart it leads. Yes, a heart deceives hotter than inferno. Dante. Let's keep it elegante. Because the song was called Elegante, we had to find that rhyme. And Claire Douglas, who was just so instrumental to that first verse of that song, she was like, "Well, you're kind of talking about sexual tension and the dark side, the dark nature of what people get into sexually." And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Well, Dante's Inferno is, not, it is and it isn't really about that. It's heaven and hell and kind of the where we end up, if we make these wrong decisions." She said, "Maybe you can use that as a way to explain that." So she's the one who said, use Dante to rhyme with elegante. Mm-hmm. And that's the kind of thing that I never would have done, and that's what you get when you write with people who have that kind of talent, where that's their job in Nashville, is that they come in and they say, tap, 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 tap. These are the lines and this is what you can say there. And they gave me everything I needed. And I was so happy with the outcome. And I love everything that was created, like in the song Maze, the spiral staircase taking me high and low. That's what relationships do. That's what love is. It's the highs and the lows of it. Yeah. I would have said it like, I don't know, I would never have said a spiral staircase taking me high and low. And that came from Nick Brown, from Mona. Those are things that, I needed to say differently, and that's why I did it. And I loved it, and now I can understand why you see a Beyonce track's got like, 10 or 15 writers on it. It's also about helping build up someone else's career, giving an opportunity to a young artist that may not have that, so it's about that as well.
Yeah, a lot of people really don't get that, man. That whole thing of collaboration. Like they'll say, the Beatles did it with this, Beyonce did it with 15 writers, but most people say that, like you said, are keyboard warriors. You know,
Yeah, exactly.
they play the radio really well.
Yeah.
What do you need? You have Mona on that. Is that something that the producer is like, hey, you should have this, or was it your idea? Were you a fan? You know?
Yeah, no, I love Mona, and Nick is one of my best friends. So I was like, I need you to be featured on this track. So he's the first part of the second, or the second part of the second verse.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah, it's our first part of the second verse, and then we harmonize on the second part. But yeah, and Nick's an amazing songwriter and a brilliant lyricist, and he just that was a home run with that track. I gave it to him. I said, we're working on Ugly, and Ryan Sorstad and I were working on Ugly, and I said, hey man, I got this song that I think you is right up your alley. Would you just give it a listen and tell me what you think? And he went into the other room and came back in 15 minutes, and he'd recorded the first verse with the four keywords that I gave him. And I was like, okay, that one's done. So,
yeah.
that's the
And
thing.
in Ugly, that the line, I signed up, I subscribed, I voted, I stood in
Yeah,
line just to be demoted. Like,
yeah,
god damn, dude. It's
yeah,
that's why I asked, were you angry when you wrote that? It's just such a perfect analogy of what goes on right now. Like somebody will post like, oh, I went and did this today, and you've got 100 people like, great for you, and one of them's like, yeah, fuck you, I hate Pokemon Go or whatever.
yeah,
Whatever
yeah,
someone
yeah,
enjoys, there's always that one person that wants to shit on it.
yeah, exactly.
uh Forgive me for saying this. I Should Be Happy. Now, I toured with this one band and was in the studio with them a couple of times and watched them rehearse. It's got a little bit of Death from Above 1979 in there, man.
Oh, I love them. Yeah, I love
Oh,
them.
yeah. So that's what I got out of that. That I'm not saying it's just like it, but that's what it reminded me of, those breaks and that fucking verse and the way it breaks into the chorus. But
Yeah, I mean that's like I said, we didn't shy away from any influences or any inspirations. If that was what the song was doing, and I that's one of my favorite bands. So when Island brought that guitar part in, I was like, oh, ooh, I know where we're going with this. We're going to do Death from Above. And he's like, how do you know about them? I'm like, dude, what are you talking about? Like everybody knows about them. And he's like, dude, no one knows about
nobody
them. So
knows.
yeah, I mean, I knew exactly what we were going to do with that track, and that was, if you look at the notes, if Don ever shows the notes for these songs, every single one has The National, Death from Above, War on Drugs, The Cure. Like I mean, we were just so. It was very important to us that the producer and the team and the engineers and the mixer understood the tone that we were going for with this record, and we just had to do that, and that's what we did. So um, you know it just happened to be that was our main influence for that track.
Yeah. Well, that's great, man. I love that band. I toured with them on their comeback tour, and just to hear them every night, I lost 50% of my hearing,
Oh
but
yeah,
it was great. It was great.
yeah, yeah, they're
Before I for,
insane, dude.
Before I forget, we'll talk a little bit more about the album and the tour real quick. But before I forget, the live album you guys did with the original lineup, are you guys tight? Is it very? I mean, you guys friends?
Are we friends? I mean, I would say we know what we have to do as a
Uh-huh.
group of musicians. There's a lot of history with Candlebox on all four parts. So
Mhm.
when we get together to do stuff, it's nice to see them. It's nice to work. It's nice to play.
Yeah.
Um, but there's not. We don't call one another on our birthdays.
Yeah.
Candlebox was a happy accident, and this will all come out when the documentary comes out as well. It talks about how we formed, and we didn't know one another. We weren't friends. I knew Scott. That's it.
Yeah.
And I really didn't even like Scott that much when I first met him. Because he came to my 16th birthday party with somebody I hated, this guy named Josh. And so I had that kind of bad taste in my mouth.
Yeah.
and we, as a band, we argued so much over songwriting, and it was just ridiculous because we were sharing everything equally. So it really meant it having to put your 2 cents on something that was already working that didn't need 2 cents was like, why are you doing that? I don't understand. But so are we friends? I'd say we are we're connected
Yeah.
through the band and through the history of Candlebox, and we will always be connected.
Yeah.
Are we friendly? Absolutely, we're friendly, but it's not, there's not a, hey, dude, what are you doing? I'm going to come up and hang out. I haven't seen you in ages, or that none of that happens.
Yeah. Yeah. So Live at the Neptune was basically you guys knew that the name Candlebox was, being retired, or you were retiring the band. Kind of something for the fans. Like, we're gonna do this.
No, 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 no. I mean, I hadn't told the guys in the band at all that I was putting Candlebox away.
Yeah.
That was basically the celebration of the Lucy record, which was supposed to happen during COVID, and it couldn't.
Okay.
So we had to wait a year to do it. And that was the 25th anniversary of Lucy. So the reason we did the Neptune was we were supposed to do the Crocodile. It wasn't open. We knew we were going to record it because we always wanted to release an acoustic album. And the Neptune was just such a fantastic sounding venue that that's why we did it there.
Yeah.
And it was also, we wanted to do the acoustic set and then the full live show, which is the Paramount the next night. So that was just the foundation of the reason why we did it. It wasn't really that, hey, I'm going to put this band away and we should, put an acoustic album out. It was just, we had wanted to release an acoustic record, and that seemed like the obvious.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about the documentary coming out?
Yeah, the documentary is called Far Behind the Candlebox Story. It's being shopped right now. It is, all the dirty, dark secrets of the band and what happened and how we got to where we got to, and the beauty of it. And it's everything. There's stories in there that people will be like, what? How the hell did that happen? And there's just a lot of stuff that people don't know about Candlebox. We have been considered this, the redheaded stepchild of the Seattle music scene for 30 plus years. So it's maybe time that our story comes out and people actually learn a little bit about the band and what we experienced and went through as four guys trying to find their footing in a city full of brilliant musicians and bands that had been around a lot longer than us.
Yeah. What would your fans be most surprised about you?
The missed opportunities. Yeah, there's several missed opportunities that Candlebox would not be in this position had we done these things that we should have done.
Right on. Yeah. How does it feel, dude, after 30 years? Like, you play a show and maybe you meet some fans and they come up and tell you, like, hey, Far Behind changed me, or this song really means it. How does that make you feel as a songwriter?
Oh, I mean, it's amazing. Without the fans, you have nothing, and Candlebox doesn't even exist without that. We were so lucky early on to made a record that people felt attached to almost overnight. And Far Behind changed my life when I wrote it about Andy. It's those are those types of songs. When I met Aerosmith, when we toured with Aerosmith, telling Steven Tyler that "Lickin' a Promise" is one of my favorite songs of all time, and it made me want to sing rock and roll. Those things are just special things that you just you can't shake. And when somebody tells you that your song has saved their life or changed their life, or it's was played at their friend's funeral or something like that, it validates what you do as an artist, as a musician. It gives you a sense of purpose and meaning as an artist.
Yeah. On a lighter note, have you ever watched the Eastbound and Down episode where Danny McBride walks in with the boombox blasting?
Yeah, it's one of the best.
It's
one
great,
of the best ever.
Yeah. I watch that sometimes when I just want to laugh out loud alone. Man, not to disparage the other members of Candlebox, people, in my opinion, and this is just strictly my opinion, I compare you guys to Journey. What do you know about Journey? You know the fucking songs and you know the voice. Dude, I watched
I
live
mean,
stuff from just recently, and your voice is still as powerful, as strong, and I still get chills hearing you hit those high notes, man. And
oh,
that's a compliment. So, I mean, it
Any of the notes. Any of the notes.
any of the notes. She speaks.
yeah, I heard that. No, Candlebox is kind of, I've always said this, Candlebox is the journey of the Seattle music scene. It's the most faceless rock and roll band, but you knew Steve Perry and you knew that voice. And Arnell does a great job. I mean, that kid can sing his ass off. I mean, I shouldn't say kid, he's my age, 54 years old. But and he does them great justice. I went and saw Journey with Toto when we were out on the road last year, and it was spectacular. I mean, it was fascinating how good the band was. But again, you've got the same kind of turmoil inside the band. Steve Smith comes back, and the bass player tries to convince him to steal the name, and they can take the name, and then they get kicked out of the band. I mean, all this kind of bullshit that goes along with, why can't you just be Journey? Why can't you just be Journey? And people said that about Candlebox. Why can't you just be Candlebox? Because there's a lot of shit in there that doesn't work. And Pete got up and played with us on 3 shows in Florida. And it was really nice to have him. And it was great. The audience that got to see him play, it was fantastic. But Candlebox is not Kevin and Pete and Barty and Scott anymore. It hasn't been that for a long, long time. And Journey's a very similar situation for them. As it's Neil Sean and Jonathan Cain. And that's just,
it's crazy. You hear, because everything's public, John suing Neil suing John. Hey, but we just announced this huge tour with Toto. Literally yesterday they just announced a huge tour.
Yeah, and it's financial for them, of course. I mean, this is a band that's making whatever $250,000, $300,000 a show. If Candlebox was making that kind of money, I'm sure I could put my opinions of the rest of the band aside. But we're not, so it's not happening.
Right on. It was a very similar situation. I started. I'm a guitar bass tech. I started in country music, and the band that I was with was doing shows with Brooks and Dunn, and it was a very similar situation. Like, those guys didn't talk. Different tour buses. When it came time for the show, they got off the tour bus, they went and sat down, checked their makeup, came in on opposite sides of the stage, and they were best fucking friends. As it was over, they walked out and got in their own tour bus. They were doing it for the sake of the check, And it showed, to somebody who saw it, you're like, oh, yeah, I noticed that they really don't like each other,
Yeah. Well, listen, that's, I'm not going to say I don't like Pete, because I do. And I loved having him on stage, and it was really nice to hear those songs played the way that they were written, because we did the 3 Doors Down dates, we did every song except Rain from the debut album in one new song. So we got 11 songs in the set. Those 10 songs were, those are Pete's fingerprints all over them. So, it was really nice to hear that. Did I want to, I could have made it work all summer long, but I don't think he could have made it work all summer long, because I'm a different person, and I have been in control of the Candlebox train for the past 7 years. And I'm a control freak. And if you're doing something that I'm not going to agree with, I'm certainly going to fucking sit down with you and tell you that. So I don't know if Pete would have lasted all summer with me. He probably would have wanted to kill me. So it's probably best that we did it the way we did it, with the Eagles and, all these bands that do this sort of stuff, like you're talking about with Brooks and Dunn and, Journey and all this kind of shit. When you're talking millions of dollars, man, take the fucking money, but where Candlebox is, I'm all about the art. I've never really been about the financial side of things. I'm going to Australia to play 4 shows. I'm going to make $0 fucking dollars. Literally, I'm going to be in debt $7,000, but I want to go to Australia to play shows. So I will do it. I'm that artist. I'm that musician, and I'm an idiot because I do that. But, yes, I am. But, that's the thing. It's what's the lesser of two evils? Well, for me, it's about the art.
Australia thanks you.
Exactly. Yeah. So there you go.
I'm sure they.
Well, mine and Lisa's relationship are very much the same. Like, we'll do an interview with someone. They're like, "Hey, where can I get a shirt?" I'm like, "I'll give you one." And she's like, "You can order them online."
Yeah. She's the smart one. She's the businessman.
Here, take it. Here, take this one. Man, we only have you for a few more minutes. Man, after 30 years, dude, what are your plans? Are you going to miss touring? Are you going to record? Are you putting your recording career to rest? What are you going to do? You're going to miss the groupies and all that?
I will not miss that at all. I think the thing that's I'm releasing a bourbon next year with Nick from Mona. He and I are releasing a bourbon, a couple actually, a couple of different ones. And we're releasing a tequila in a couple of years. So I have things outside of the band that I've been doing for a long, long time that I'm really looking forward to launching. But I've been asked to produce a couple of records next year. So I'll still be, and I also have my foundation, Riptide Society, which I'll still play charitable events for that. If anybody asks me to do a charity, I'll do that. But the band is done. I will not make Candlebox Records anymore. If Pete wants to go off and do something with the name, he's more than welcome to do that. But I'm done with this. I got a son that I want to be a father to, and a wife that I want to be a husband to, and I love being at home. I'm a homebody. I'm doing shit around the house right now. I've got my shower doors off because I'm replacing the hinges on it. I mean, that's the shit I do, and I was a contractor before I was a musician. So I like doing shit around the house. So
it's very rock and roll, Kevin. Very rock and roll.
Well, Harrison Ford was as well. So maybe we have something.
I know. Man, thank you so much. I just want to say this, when we interviewed Carlos, your front of house guy, photographer, all around guy, he said, "Would you like to interview Kevin?" And we were both pretty excited, both being fans. Like I said, when you came through, it was Club Indigo is where you played with the high watts, and you were very kind to me. As like it's easy to be annoyed by I've in my old age I've become a lot more self-aware, but I was a big fan of your band, and I still am a big fan of your band. Like I said, people know Journey by the songs and the voice, and that's how people know Candlebox, by the songs.
Oh, thanks, man. Thank you.
And the voice. Our podcast is called Is Breakfast Included? And if you are having breakfast with us right now, what would you have?
2 eggs over easy, well done hash browns, pork sausage, and Tabasco sauce. But my son calls it a train wreck because I take the eggs and I throw them over the hash browns and I mix it all up. It's kind of like like hash after the bash sort of thing. So he calls it a car crash or a train wreck. But yeah, that's and a glass of orange juice and a cup of coffee. I mean, I'm a pretty basic guy when it comes to food. That's not to say I don't have excellent taste in sushi, but I'm a eggs and bacon, eggs and sausage kind of guy.
Well, right on, man. Kevin, thank you so much, man. It's been an honor to talk to you. And good luck, man, with the next 30 years of your career.
Oh, God, if I still have 30 years, it'd be amazing, right?
Yeah.
Or whatever you decide to do.
Thank you so much.
Have a great day, man.
All right, we'll see you guys.
All right, bye-bye. What did I tell you? What did I tell you? Goddamn, Kevin Martin just did our podcast, and that might not be a big deal to a lot of you guys, but it's a big deal to me. Like I told him at the end, I met him several years ago when he was singing for the High Watts, and he was very kind to me, and he treated like a human being. If you know me, you know that I use that word human being a lot. When you treat someone like a human being, everyone should be treated like a human being, but there's some people in this world that don't treat people like a human being. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, if you missed out on their final tour, I'm sorry. It was an amazing tour with Three Doors Down, but you can still check out the last Candlebox album. It's called The Long Goodbye. Man, it is a barn burner. So many good songs on there. They gave us a hell of a career, man, to follow and to keep up with. Get online, check it out, download it. And if Kevin comes out with anything else, support it. He's a great guy. And like I said, he was very gracious with his time, and he entertained my fanboyism. Is that a word? Fanboyism? Anyway, don't forget to check out our online store, isbreakfast.bigcartel.com. Buy a shirt, buy 2 shirts. Anyway, I am done. Have a great day. We'll talk to you next week.